back to the Amplified Podcast. I am your host, Jac Carnett. This is a podcast all about helping you understand the Bible a little bit better. This is about going through the Bible verse by verse, story by story, and getting kind of a forest-sized view of the Bible. And I mean that like sometimes we can get so lost in the details that we can't really see the forest for the trees. And when it's talking about the Bible, there are a lot of trees. And so that's what this podcast is all about, is helping you understand the Bible a little bit better. And we're going through it line by line. And up until now, we've gone all the way through the flood. We've gone all the way through from Adam, through Noah, through the flood. And now we're going to be looking at the descendants of Noah for this chapter and where they all ended up. Because you think about it like this. The inhabited world is now completely wiped clean. In other words, there are no inhabitants. And so there are no cities left. And all new cities, all new countries are going to be established. And a lot of them are still named after, or the name descends from what it was then today. I mean, Damascus is an extremely old name. And I don't know if it pops up in this chapter, but we may find some names of things that are still the same name today, 3,000 years later. And so that's what we're going to be going through. If you're watching online, this is going to be an even better episode to watch online, because I have this map that shows by color which son specific descendant was from, but also where they settled kind of in the Europe, Africa, Asia, Eurasia, around the Mediterranean world at that time. And so we're going to dive right into it. This is in chapter 10 of Genesis. We'll probably cover chapter 10 and 11 over the course of this episode, and we'll get into some fun stuff. It's going to be a good time. So this is what it says. The flood has just ended. The rainbow is now a covenant in the sky that God will never destroy all the earth with the flood again. And this is what it says. These are the records of the generations, the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, the first, and the sons born to them after the flood. So, our main characters, here we go. Our main characters are Shem. Let me turn this on real quick. Our main characters are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, I won't be able to write all of them down, but we're going to, because there's a lot of descendants listed here, but we're going to write down some names that are like some bigger players moving forward. And I'll show you the map as well in just a moment. But it says the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. And it's going to go through the sons of Gomer. Sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah, the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, Dodanim. And from these people, the people of the coastlands of the nations were separated and spread into their lands, everyone according to its language, according to their own constituent groups, families, and into their nations. And so let's look at this map real quick. So if we're looking at the sons of Japheth, that's everybody in green. And so Japheth his people, his sons, they all kind of take over like the northern areas. And so they kind of take over Europe. And so Tarshish, we even see mentioned in the story of Jonah. That's the same, still called the same thing. And it's named after his son, Tarshish. And that's all the way over here on the coast of, I believe that would be Spain. Forgive me if that's not Spain. I believe that's Spain and Portugal there. But we see them settle more of Europe. We see them settle Italy, looks like Greece, and everywhere around the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, kind of moving northward. And so a lot of those peoples that are still living there, of course, people move every day, but they're all kind of going to be descended from the same aunts, uncles, and father, which was Japheth. And so that's why it's talking about the coastlands, kind of that area around the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, that area. But it says this, from the sons of Ham. Now this, going back, he's kind of the antagonist in the story when it comes to the story of the Israelites. Not to say that people still descended from Cush are the antagonists today, because we've all been given the same opportunity through Jesus to be the protagonist in the story. But as far as the Israelites are concerned, from the next couple thousand years, this is who the enemies are. Sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, from whom the descendants of Egypt are from. So let's see if I can get this right. Egypt being about right. I missed it a little bit. Egypt being about right here. So that's where Mizraim his descendants go. His son Put and Canaan. Now Canaan is going to be one of the main characters over the next couple thousand years. And it's really his sons that are going to be kind of a thorn in the side of the Israelites from here on out. From the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. So these are all major players. We're talking about patriarchs, that cities, that nations are named after. But again, this is not really their story. This is the story of God's people. And so there are many texts hidden all around the world in historic libraries that can tell their story. But this Bible, this is the story of God's people. So it's going to really hone in on the generations that led to Abraham, because Abraham's kind of father of Israel. And so it says this, Cush became the father of Nimrod. Now, Nimrod is a big name that we're going to want to remember. He's a big player. I don't think you can see that at all down there. Give me just a moment. Let me erase it. We'll put Nimrod over here. Nimrod is a big name that we're going to want to remember. So all the descendants of Shem are in purple. All the descendants of Ham are in orange, and Japheth is in green. So Japheth really moves north, and a lot of the descendants of Ham kind of inhabit Egypt. Looks like modern day Arabia and Turkey. And the descendants of Shem are going to be, farther east towards the end of the Red Sea, and looks like in northern Turkey as well. And so Ham and Shem kind of mix a little bit more, and Japheth definitely goes north. And it says this, Cush became the father of Nimrod, and he was a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. So it's kind of giving us like slang for that time, like he's like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before. It's just like a phrase that they would have used a lot in that time. And so when it says a mighty hunter before the Lord, when we really study it, it doesn't just mean that he was good at hunting animals. That's really what they mean, is that he was an accomplished killer of men, that he was a man of war. He was, mighty in his generation for such a thing. And it's believed that he is of Nephilim status, that yes, Cush is his father, but when we examine the Hebrew of it, this word could also mean grandfather, or is in kind of the family line. He's the direct family line of Cush. And so it's very possible that in the same way we see the 200 angels descend on Mount Hermon before the flood, and those are washed away, wiped away. They're, as Jude tells us, they're held in gloomy darkness until the end of days. That 200 more angels decided to, launch the same campaign, and they're messing with genetics again. They're wanting to achieve a higher status again. And so we see, this character, and I was talking to my pastor about this just recently, that we have this character that pops up in almost every historical account. There's like this half god, half man. Nimrod, Hercules, Thor, I want to say there's one for Egypt as well. It's not the god of Ra, but it's like his son. And we see these in Japanese texts. We see them in Native American texts. We see them in African stories where, this is kind of a spoiler alert, but where Nimrod built Babel, and he was like the leading man in Babel. We're going to see God confuse the languages and scatter the people. But these people all still remember the same creator of Babel, the same man, but now they're calling him by a different name under a different language. So it's possible that Nimrod, like all these accounts are talking about the same guy, Nimrod, talking about one dude. Not to say that there weren't other mighty Nephilim, mighty hunters, mighty whatever, but I really think that they're all talking about the same guy. It says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech, and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar in Babylonia. So this is going to be still in like the area around the Mediterranean. I don't remember exactly where those cities would have been, but suffice it to say it's probably the east coast of the Mediterranean is where we're seeing these being built. And Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh are all different cities that he's kind of the head over. From that land, Nimrod went to Assyria and built Nineveh and Rehoboth-ir and Calah. Nineveh, of course, we know that from Jonah as well. Nineveh, I suppose from here on out, is a wicked city until Jonah comes and evangelizes them. And it says this, and Nimrod built Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah. All these combined to form the great city, Nineveh. Okay. Mizraim, the ancestor of the Egyptians. I don't know why I say it like that. The Egyptians. It's hard going like, these are old Hebrew and Hebrew names. It's hard to go from English to Hebrew. But became the father of Ludim, Ananim, Lehabim, and Naphtuhim. I think I'm getting these right. And Pathruzim and Chalcehim, and from those came the Philistines and the Caphtorim. And so I don't want you to get lost in all these details, because the whole purpose of this podcast is to help us understand better amidst all the details. And so what we're seeing is not only their descendants, this family tree, but it's kind of like Moses is informing us, here are the other major players in the game. Here's like, if we're taking a walk, here's all the other major players. Here's what's going on. But keep your eye on the road, because we're going to Abraham. We're going to make it to Abraham. And so these guys are important. They established huge, enormous, profitable cities. But this is the story of Abraham. And so we're being taken on a journey to Abraham. And it says this, Canaan became the father of Sidon, which is I believe the Sidonites, and his firstborn Heth, which became the Hittites later on, and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Girgashites and the Hivites and the Archites and the Sinites. And so all of the ites are right here. And whenever you hear ites, it's usually just a man's name, such as Heth. All the sons of Heth become the Hittites. All the sons of Amor become the Amorites. It's just taking the father, the patriarch's name, and adding ites to the end. So like my last name is Carnett, I would be like a Carnettite. And you just take your last name and add ite. That's kind of the way it works. And so Canaan becomes the Canaanites. It's pretty simple put together. And the Arvadites and the Zemarites and the Hamathites. Afterward, the families of the Canaanites were spread abroad. So they all kind of started where Israel is today and spread out from there. A lot of them stuck around, which is why we see when God sends Moses and the people of Israel in, he has them take out and scatter the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amalekites, because they're still there. And that's God's land. Afterward, the families of Canaanites were spread abroad, and says in verse 19, the territory of the Canaanite extended from Sidon as one goes to Gerar as far as Gaza. So like I said, There are some cities that still retain the same name that they have for 4,000 years, 5,000 years. It's been the same name. And as we'll see, it's unfortunate Gaza has so much war going on in it today, but it's not the first time. Gaza has been a place of conflict since the beginning of it, really. The territory of the Canaanite extended from Sidon as one goes to Gerar as far as Gaza, and as one goes from Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to learn more about them later. And Admah and Zeboim as far as Lasha. These are the descendants of Ham according to their constituent groups, according to their languages, by their lands, by their nations. So it's kind of just a bookend. These were all the descendants of Ham. Also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, including the Hebrews. And so now we're looking at, for following the line down to Abraham, it would go Noah and then Shem. And then we're going to follow all the way down to the Israelites, to Abraham, to the Hebrews. Eber is actually where we get the word Hebrew. And so it works out. The older brother Japheth, also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the older brother of Japheth, children were born. Sons of Shem, Elam, Assur, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. We'll write down Shem as well here. Let's choose a different color. So we have, we'll write across the bottom here. We have Noah to Shem. And I know that Arpachshad is in the line of Abraham as well. Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram, the sons of Aram, ancestor of the Syrians. We have the Uz, the Hul, the Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad became the father of Shelah, and Shelah became the father of Eber. So I believe those two are next in line. Down to Abraham, Shelah, yeah, Lah. Shelah moves on to Eber. We'll go to the second line. Eber. The name of one was Peleg. Division for the inhabitants of the earth were divided in his days, and his brother name was Joktan. So Peleg comes next. Peleg. And now in the book of Enoch, which is not in our Bible, we talked about that in the last two episodes. It says that in the days of Jared was when the angels came to the earth. Here it's telling us again that in the next chapter we'll see the confusion of languages with Babel, and it's in the it says 2 sons were born to Eber. The name of one son was Peleg, meaning division, for the inhabitants of the earth were divided in his days. So it's the Bible's telling us that after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. It only took 6 generations for, you guys can't see any of those, I just realized. It only took 6 generations for the earth to become wicked enough to resort for God to resort to intervening again. And Peleg, meaning division, is it's the generation, the year kind of based circa Peleg, when we have Babel and the confusion of languages, as we'll read about. The earth was divided in his days, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan became the father of Almadad, Sheleph, Hazar Maveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Diklah, and Obal, Abimael, Sheba, and Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were born to Joktan. Now, the only one of those that I really recognize is Ophir, because Ophir becomes the name of the area where the most gold is found. And I was just with my in-laws in Sacramento, and as you're coming down the mountain from Northern California, there's an exit called Ophir. And I asked him, I said, has this area ever seen, is this is there any gold around here? And my in-laws were like, yeah, this is exactly where the gold rush in 1849 would have taken place. This is kind of the center of it. And the name Ophir is a reference to the biblical accounts of Ophir being the place where all the gold was. And so we'll see that pop up in the book of Kings as well. And so that name's kind of important. Now in verse 30, it says this: now their territory extended from Mesha as one goes towards Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are Shem's descendants according to their constituent groups, according to their languages, by their lands, according to their nations. These are the families, the sons of Noah, according to their descendants by their nations. From these people, the nations were separated and spread about on the earth after the flood. So this is just giving us an account of where everybody ended up. That's the story of what's happening here. Now, moving on to chapter 11. Give me just a second. Let me get a drink. Moving on to chapter 11. Now the whole earth spoke one language, used the same words. This makes total sense because if one family's getting off the ark, they all speak one language. They have kids, they have kids, they have kids. Everybody speaks the same language. It's not like other people waiting for them out there or other nations that they can go to learn a new language. One people, one nation, one language. And as people journeyed eastward, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. They said to one another, come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly in a kiln to harden and strengthen them. So they used brick for stone as building material, and they used tar, bitumen, asphalt for mortar. And so this area, let me see if it's on my map here. So this is the land of Shinar. Well, suffice it to say, it's in the area around Israel, as it always is. It's in the area around Israel. And they said, come, let us build a city for ourselves and a tower whose top will reach into the heavens. And let us make a famous name for ourselves so that we will not be scattered into separate groups and be dispersed over the face of the entire earth as the Lord instructed. That's a very interesting verse. Come, let us build a city for ourselves. Let's do something for ourselves apart from God. That's what that means. And a tower whose top will reach into the heavens. So when it's talking about a tower, it's really talking about a ziggurat. We see all over the world. I'm going to take our little map down here for a second. Sons of Noah map. Let me erase this real quick. So all over the world, we see ziggurats appear, and it's this building that looks like this, and it has stair steps going up to the top, like this, coming down, stair steps, like that, to ziggurats, and there's steps going all the way up to the top. And the idea was that this isn't just like the Willis Tower where we have offices and everything. This was a place of worship. This is where it all goes back to this. You know what? I'm just reminded of this. The enemy, when he was cast out of heaven, he had pride in his heart because he said, I will ascend to heaven. I will ascend higher and be like the Most High. This is, again, a perfect example of demonic, angelic interference with man, wickedness coming into man, saying, we will descend and be like the Most High. And up here, we're gonna perform sacrifices. We're gonna let religious stuff happen up here at the top to kind of bring together heaven and earth so that we can ascend and be like the Most High. That's what the goal is for them to, elevate their status. Once again, there's so much good separation in the Bible, and we're seeing a perfect example here where they don't want separation to be there. They want to ascend and be like the Most High. And it's funny that they should say, we want to make a name for ourselves. We want to be, have a name the way God does have a name, so that we will not be scattered into separate groups. It's funny that they knew that if they didn't do this, that they were going to be scattered. But the funny thing is, because they did do this, they were scattered. And so it's just interesting. It's like, how did you know that was obviously going to be the punishment? And so, whatever. But so they would not be scattered into separate groups and be dispersed over the surface of the entire earth as the Lord instructed. The Lord said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. But they're all congregating in one area so that they can build a tower and make a name for themselves. And it's because of this dispersion that we see here. The first ziggurat, the first big Tower of Babel, is here in the Middle East. But then when people are spread out and the languages are dispersed and all the families do fill the entire earth, they just go to their new home and they start building ziggurats again, which is why we see ziggurats in the Americas. It's why we see them in Asia. It's why we see them in Southern Africa. It's why we see them in Europe and all these European countries. And we still see them in the Middle East. It's because they were all trying to recreate this moment in the new place where they were. That's how it worked. They were scattered over the surface of the entire earth. And so in verse 5, it says this, now the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. The Lord said, behold, they are one unified people, and they all have the same language. This is only the beginning of what they will do in rebellion against me. And now no evil thing they can imagine, no evil thing they imagine they can do will be impossible for them. So God's saying, listen, I've given them enough authority on this earth, enough natural power and intuition and imagination. And now that they have this demonic, anti-angelic, coercion, nothing's going to be impossible for them, especially together as one language. It all ties back again to when we see the Holy Spirit descend in Acts 2, that God gives us a heavenly language. He allows us to speak in tongues. And as the people of Christ come together under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and we can seek and speak to the Lord and speak in tongues, that we are again unified in one language. And nothing is impossible for the church by the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. It's God giving us that gift of one language back. So it says in verse 7, come, let us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, this is God talking, go down and confuse and mix up their languages so they will not understand one another's speech. Again, this is an act of mercy, because if they let this go on long enough, the evil that they will wrought, that they will bring about, is going to be just like before the flood. And Jesus won't be able to come because, again, they're going to start doing things that are going to mess with the line of man and the line of the seed all the way down to Jesus. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the surface of the entire earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, the name of the city was Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the entire earth, and from that place the Lord scattered and dispersed them over the surface of the earth. And so that's how it happened. And I truly believe that that's why we have so many creative languages today, because yes, this was a judgment on man, but hearing someone worship in another language is one of the most beautiful things you can hear. And different cultures and the way we see different cultures manifest in the world is some of the most beautiful things that you can see. And the way it all comes together is amazing. And so it's a judgment, but as we referenced in the first couple episodes, every judgment that God delivers is truly a blessing. It's truly a blessing. And so here are the descendants of Shem. And so I'm going to erase this down here because we're going to go through the descendants that will lead us to Abraham. Lead us to Abraham. These are the records and generations of Shem, from whom Abraham descended. Again, like I said, this is the story of God's people. There are plenty of accounts you can read about all those other dudes. They're doing wild stuff. This is God's story, the story of his people. These are the records and generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when he became the father of Arpachshad, who was 100 years old when he became the father of Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. So when we go through this, we're going to do something similar that we did when we were looking at Adam to Noah. We're going to do the same thing from Noah to Abraham, where Noah was, let's look at it real quick. Go back. Noah was, I think he was 500 years old. Yeah, he was 500 years old when he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we know Shem is the next in the line. And Noah lives 950 years. And he's 600 when the flood comes. And so 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 102, the flood comes, meaning that Noah had, I got this. When Shem came along, Noah had 300. I'm sorry. When Arpachshad came along, he had 348 years left. So Shem lived 500 years after Arpachshad was born. So 500 years, meaning he died at 602. Right, 602. Okay, so now Arpachshad is next. When Arpachshad had lived, 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. 35 years, became the father of Shelah. Arpachshad lived 403 years after Shelah was born, had other sons and daughters. So 438 years left after was his lifespan. Meaning that Shelah, when Shelah was born, Noah had 313 years left to live. This is a lot of math. There's a lot of math to do, but we're going to see how old Noah was. So, when Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. 30 years, he became the father of Eber. Shelah lived 403 years after Eber was born. So 433 years. And when Eber was born, that means that Noah had 283 years left to live. When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg. I'm going to run out of space real quick here. Became the father of Peleg. And Eber lived another 430 years after Peleg was born, meaning he died at 464. So already we're seeing as these boys come along that they're not living 950 years anymore. They're living 600, then 400, the low 400s, and it's going to get smaller and smaller. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. I gotta make that smaller because we got a lot of names to get through. Reu is down here. And when Peleg was born, Noah had 249 years left to go. When Peleg lived 209 years after Reu was born, meaning Peleg only lived 239 years. So it's getting smaller and smaller. And Reu lived when Reu lived 32 years, he became the father of Sereg. So 32 years. They're all having sons about the same time. Reu, we've got Sereg. Sereg is down here. When Sereg had lived 30 years. I'm sorry. When Reu lived 207 years after Serug was born. So he dies at 237. And when Reu was born, Noah had 219 years left. When Serug was born, Noah had 187 years left. When Reu had lived 207 years after Serug was born and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. Serug lived 200 years after Nahor was born, died at 230. And he had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. 29 years, became the father of Terah. So Nahor lived 29 years. Nahor lived 119 years, meaning that when he died, he was 138. Their lifespans are getting much, much shorter. And when Nahor was born, Noah had 157 years left to live. Now we're at Terah. Terah had lived 70 years. He became the father of Abraham, finally. And had other sons and daughters. Terah had became the father of Abram and Nahor and Haran, his firstborn. So Abraham, he'll eventually become Abraham. So when we see Abraham being born, we also see his siblings. So I'm going to fix this a little bit. Terah, and down here we have Abraham. Well, he'll become Abraham, but Abram, and this is in verse 26. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram and Nahor and Haran. I guess Haran was his firstborn. Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the records of the descendants of Terah. Terah was the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran was the father of Lot. Lot is going to be an important character later on too. I'm running out of space. Lot. Right there. Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. Abram's wife was named Sarai, later called Sarah. So we're going to put Sarai over here. And the daughter and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. Imagine growing up with the name Milcah, the daughter of Haran. And so Nahor married his niece. Nahor married Haran's daughter, Milcah. Yeah. And the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. But Sarai was barren, and she did not have a child. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, and his son Abram's wife, and they went out together to go from Ur the Chaldeans into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, about 550 miles northwest of Ur, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. He lived 205 years. Meaning that if Terah was 70 years old when Abram was born, all of this has been leading to this big number. And Noah still was alive for another 58 years. So all this is to say, when we think about these stories, we think about these people being super far apart. And in this case, they were about 300 years apart being born. But it's possible that Noah knew Abraham. It's possible. It's possible that it's not possible for Noah to have known any of his sons because they didn't have children until they were 100 years old. But Noah was still alive for another 58 years after Abram was born. That is just wild. And so these people lived for a long, long time. We have to think about it in a different context for then than we do now. They lived for a very, very long time. And so in this episode, we got to see the scattering of the people and how they settled in different places, not only after the flood, but after the dispersion of the languages. And we see the beginning now of the line of Jesus all the way down to Abraham. And so with that, we see from Adam to Noah and Noah to Abram. And now we're going to follow Abram's story. And what's cool about the next few episodes and kind of from here on out is we've been looking at thousands of years of history in just 11 chapters. But it's about to slow way, way, way down, where we might cover 1,000 years in one chapter. From here on out, we're going to be covering like weeks and months in one chapter. And we're going to get to see more about these people's lives because we would have had more records when Moses was writing this down about their lives and about their stories. And so that's what we're going to be covering in the next few episodes. And so I'm glad you joined us for this. This was a lot of math. We probably won't do as much math going forward with the Bible, but this is how it looks coming together, where we have Noah and Abram. You know, they're only separated. They got to be on the earth at the same time for 58 whole years. It's like a normal lifespan for us now. It's a little young, but still it's crazy. And so that's the story of Babel. And we could dive into it probably for months if we wanted to get into all the details, but hopefully this has helped you understand. Hopefully I didn't just confuse you far more with all the numbers, but it's the story of God's people. It's the story of Adam, the story of Noah, the story of Abram, the story of King David, the story of Jesus. And we're going to be exploring it more and more. Again, my name is Jac Carnett. I've been your host. If you're watching on Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, it helps more people see this podcast. If you like it and subscribe and get updates, we're going to try to keep putting them out week to week. And we're glad to have you with us. Please feel free to leave comments anytime. We're going to explore as many questions as we can, starting in episode 11. And so please leave comments and we'll try to answer them. And we're going to have a good time. It slows down from here, which is a good thing because we're going to get to talk about more of the stories. And so it's been good to have you with us again. This is the Amplified Podcast. See you next time.